Chairman Whatley, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be on with you, Sean.
So, listen, yesterday Trump gave this unbelievable presser. Let's start off with what were your takeaways from what he said during this event down there at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, look, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is he is acting like a president today. The conversations that he's having with world leaders that are taking place right now are conversations that, frankly, neither Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris are having, even though they technically are still the president and the vice president. The president is focused very much on when he hits the ground on January 20th of making sure that he is ready to go. He's putting in place a team right now that's going to be White House staff, as well as all of the nominations for his cabinet that are absolutely perfectly positioned to implement the agenda that he ran on. And he is serving notice to everybody in America and around the world that on January 20th, we're going to flip a switch and this is going to be a different country than it is today.
It was absolutely amazing yesterday. I mean, think about this. You're right. We're 35 days away from him taking the oath of office. He's going overseas to France, getting greeted like the current president. And then he has this event with the CEO of SoftBank, where the guy comes in, and this just shows you everything you need to know about Trump. The guy comes in and says, I'm going to pledge $100 billion with a B dollars in U.S. investment. It's going to create 100,000 jobs. And what does Donald Trump do? He says, can you make it $200 billion? You got to love this. But here's the thing. I got to wonder what Joe Biden's thinking. He's sitting there like, it just shows you the difference in leadership.
Well, there's a dramatic difference in vision, right? Joe Biden was all about protecting his family, his people, his interests, his administration. Donald Trump is all about making America great again, and he's fighting for every single American business. He's fighting for every single American family, every single American voter. And it really is remarkable when you look at the scope of the meetings that Donald Trump has had over the course of the last month since he was elected, and look at the number of people that he's meeting with, the caliber of the people that he's meeting with, the appointments that he has announced, both for the White House and for the cabinet. And it really is electric. I've spent time down at Mar-a-Lago over the last several weeks, and you can just feel it. Like there is an urgency to the president right now because he knows he's got one term. He's not running for re-elect, and he has got to get done his vision. He has got to get it done. He's got to get it implemented. And that's why he's working as hard as he is right now. And I will tell you, the urgency among him and his team today matches the urgency that we had over the course of the last month on the campaign. And it's really neat to see everybody focused on hitting the ground running on January 20th. That first 100 days is a very serious thing for the president and making sure that this agenda is going to be implemented across the board within his administration.
It wasn't, I feel like the election seems like months ago now. Just in terms of the pace at which he's made announcements and had meetings. But have you stopped and thought about what went right? Like, what did you guys do? What were the lessons learned for the RNC as you kind of already have to start looking forward? What did you guys think went really well, and what do you think you have to improve on?
Well, we ran the table in all of the battleground states. We did very, very well in all of the battleground districts around the country. But when you think about Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, there is a constancy that you have to produce in those states. There is a plan that you have to execute. You need three things. First, you have to have a great candidate run a great campaign. There's no substitute for it whatsoever. Second, you've got to get out the vote. Third, you've got to protect the ballot. Obviously, President Trump is a great candidate, and he did run a great campaign. We needed, from our perspective, to get out the vote and to protect the ballot. And so the Get Out the Vote program, we completely retooled it from the previous versions that we had utilized over the course of the last decade. And we're very, very happy with the results of going after low propensity voters, making sure that we are reaching out to constituencies that we've not always targeted from the Republican side, which is why we saw historic shifts with young voters, women voters, African American voters, Asian American voters, and Black voters. When it comes to election integrity, we built the first ever national election integrity program. We put programs in place, we put laws in place, regulations in place in every single battleground state to make sure that the right rules of the road were going to govern those elections. And then we made sure that we were in the room. We recruited 230,000 volunteers, 6,500 attorneys, and every time a vote was cast or counted, we were in the room. And that made a tremendous difference in making sure that those counts were counts that we could trust coming down the stretch.
Yeah, I think that there's no question. You guys got ahead of the curve when it came to election integrity. You know, you were suing people. You were making sure that these election officials, Pennsylvania, you and I talked about this in the lead up to the election. But you guys got in there and mixed it up and got some big victories. How do you sustain that?
Well, look, our work is not done. I mean, when we think about what we were able to accomplish in terms of turning out low propensity and non-traditional Republican votes this cycle, that's the name of the game for the midterm. I mean, the low propensity voters are going to be even more important in the 26 midterms than they were here, because the entire electorate becomes low propensity when you take out from a presidential and go into a go into a midterm. The election integrity program, we are extremely proud of the progress that we made in the battleground states through this election cycle. But we're going to have a lot of different battleground states in this cycle, and we need to make this truly national and go into every single state and make sure that they have the right programs, the right rules, the right regulations in place. And we need to make sure that we're extending our network of volunteers that are going to be both poll workers and poll observers, as well as the attorneys.
So you mentioned the number one thing when you went through your list was great candidate, Donald Trump being a great candidate. That's the concern that I have right now. How do we, as we look forward, whether it's the midterms or the next election, bring somebody to the top of the ticket that brings that kind of energy?
Well, look, I mean, in order to win in a battleground state or a battleground district, you absolutely need to talk to the voters about the issues that they care about. One of the most important things that I did when I was the state party chair in North Carolina was to go out to every candidate in the primary and tell them, find out what those issues are. Find out whether voters care about the economy, or do they care about safety, or do they care about roads, or whatever the issue set is, and then talk to them about those issues. That's what you're going to have to do. By the time you get through the primary, hopefully you have everybody talking about the right sets of issues that are going to translate into the general election. What we saw this cycle was Kamala Harris, and before her, Joe Biden, look at America as a social experiment. And they said, we're going to tell the voters what we want to talk about. And that's not what the voters wanted to hear. They kept saying the economy was fine. The economy was clearly not fine. It was the number one issue on every voter's mind. So Donald Trump talked about the economy. How are we going to restore our economy? How are we going to rebuild our southern border? How are we going to make sure that America is strong enough to protect our interests at home and abroad? The Democrats did not want to talk about those issues because they were losing on every single one of those issues in poll after poll after poll. But you know what? The voters cared about it, and they needed to talk about it. They needed to put solutions on the table. They didn't do it. And that's why Donald Trump is going to be the 47th president.
Exactly. What's the takeaway in your mind regarding the role of third parties, right? So America First Works, Turning Point USA, you name it, they had not played a role like they did legally prior to this cycle. What's your takeaway as a party chairman about how to engage or utilize them going forward?
The ruling that we got from the Federal Election Commission earlier this year, which allowed us to coordinate with the outside groups, was absolutely critical for us. It's curious that the Democrats were the ones who actually asked for that ruling and for the ability to work with the outside groups, but we were able to take such good advantage of it. Look, the fact is the NRA, Faith and Freedom Coalition, Turning Point, and various other groups had always been in the field. We just couldn't coordinate with them. Our ability to coordinate with those guys really truly complemented what we put on the ground with our grassroots efforts, which was really truly focused on low propensity voters in the target battleground states. And for these groups to come in and complement that and allow us to coordinate with each other was tremendously important. And we really truly can't thank all of those different groups enough for the work that they put in across the country. As we go into the midterm election cycle, we want to build on this program. We want to build on the coordination. We're certainly going to work with all of these groups again. But we saw Elon Musk stand up a brand new organization this cycle and put it into the field with tremendous success. We may have other groups that are going to stand up for the midterms or for the 28 cycle. We're going to want to work with them again. So, from the RNC's perspective, I want as many people in the boat as possible facing in the same direction and rowing at more or less the same time.
So, it's funny. I want to talk a little bit about the media for a second. And the first piece of this is, I heard over and over again reporters calling me based on my history with the RNC saying, how nuts is this, these third-party groups? And it was the same sort of narrative that we had in 2016, which was no party committee had ever worked with a campaign committee, i.e. the Trump 16 campaign, in the way that you guys were doing. Therefore, it can't be good. And I found the same narrative playing itself out this cycle, which is the RNC's working with these third-party groups. That's never happened before with respect to the ground game. Therefore, it can't be good. What's your takeaway in terms of how the media, do you need to educate them more? Do you think that it doesn't matter anymore in terms of that they just won't ever get it? But I found that the narrative over and over again was, well, the RNC's outsourced this and it'll never work because, well, the Dems aren't doing it that way or it's never happened that way.
Yeah, we certainly heard the word outsourced over and over and over again. And my response was always very critical to say, look, we are running our ground game. We had tens of thousands of volunteers, RNC volunteers, state party volunteers all across the country. We were just sending them to different targets. We were sending them to low propensity voters. We were working on voter registration from people that we knew were conservatives that would be Republican if they registered to vote. And then we were turning those voters out, and we had a much harder focus on those low propensity voters. Absolutely critical for what we wanted to get done. And then we had these other groups that we were able to coordinate with. Very, very, very helpful. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we were self-sufficient in our efforts to be able to get the president across the line. But the fact that we had all of these other groups out there was tremendously helpful, tremendously important. If the media is going to rewrite the narrative based on the experience from this cycle, that's fantastic. If not, we're going to go continue our work with all of these different groups and make sure that we have a ecosystem on the right that is dedicated to winning these elections.
So we've seen this over the weekend. ABC made a settlement, over $15 million in public apologies to Donald Trump for lying about the accusations against him. They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, but we know that they're not the only ones doing this. And so as you go forward as chairman of the RNC, how do you want to interact with these legacy outlets, these left-wing outlets, the Washington Post, New York Times, ABC, NBC? Because, ABC might have gotten caught and might be paying the fine, but they're not alone. I mean, I don't think they're any better than CNN or NBC.
The media did not treat Donald Trump fairly in this election cycle. They have never treated Donald Trump fairly. They are never going to treat Donald Trump fairly. That's okay. We knew that going into the election cycle. Our point in terms of dealing with the mainstream media was to understand that they were a tool in our toolkit, not the other way around. They didn't necessarily want to be allies of ours, but every single time that Donald Trump had a conversation, had an interview with a mainstream media outlet, it was an opportunity to talk through them, over them, around them, to go talk directly to the voters and give them a message. And we saw the clearest example of that in the debate, where we had moderators that did not ask a single question about the economy, the biggest issue on the table. They didn't ask a single question about illegal immigration, which was the number 2 issue on every voter's mind. So the president used the opportunity to talk past the moderators, to talk past Kamala Harris and talk directly to the American voters about the economy and about illegal immigration. He was roundly criticized for losing that debate, and yet he went up 2 points during the week after the debate because he was able to get his message out. When we talked to Elon Musk, 2 billion listeners to that interview. When he went on Joe Rogan, 50 million listeners to that podcast. He was able to use every single media opportunity that he had to go out there and talk to the people directly. That's the absolute critical importance. Now, as we go into this next election cycle, we're not going to have Donald Trump on the ballot. We're going to have, dozens of Senate candidates and congressional candidates and gubernatorial candidates. Every single one of them is going to have to figure out how they can approach the media in order to get their message out. But if you don't talk directly to your voters, you're not going to be able to win this election, no matter whether you're running for Congress or the Senate or for president.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, except yesterday during this press conference at Mar-a-Lago, CNN pulled away from it. The president of the United States is explaining border security, $100 billion investment, and countless other issues, vaccines, very important to the American electorate. And yet CNN pulls away from it during his remarks because they didn't want to cover it. And I guess my point is, that's fine. They have a right to do that. But we on our side also have a First Amendment right to choose who we assemble with, who we engage with. And my point is there a line at which we go, great, you guys cover him how you want, you cover me how you want, but then we don't owe you anything. We're not going to treat you like a legitimate media organization.
Well, I think we've already crossed that line. And frankly, if we want to go get viewers, Donald Trump can do an interview with the Food Network, which actually has more viewers than CNN these days. Look, our point is that whatever means we need to use in order to communicate with our voters, that's what we have to do. There's a reason that we're looking at reshuffling the press room at the White House and allowing some of these new podcasts and other alternative media branches into the room. So it's not just all of the mainstream media that are going to be there. I think you're exactly right, Sean. We need to treat them appropriately. And if they're not going to be willing to work with us and cover us in the ways that we think are fair, then we certainly have the ability to walk away at any point in time and go find another medium to communicate directly to the voters.
Right. I mean, it's funny. We had this polling yesterday from Signal that we showed who people voted for and where they got their information. If you watch cable, you voted for Harris 48, Trump 51. People who watch national television, 69% Harris, 30% Trump, right? Almost a 40% delta there. But here's the cool thing. If you get your information from YouTube, 41% voted for Harris, 55% for Trump. If you get your information from streaming, 35% for Harris, 61% for Trump. People who are where the media is going, podcasts, streaming, everywhere else, voted for Trump. That's where they found success. And that's where, conversely, if you're still reading a newspaper, you voted for Harris 73 to 25 for Trump. I mean, the old school legacy media is where the Democrats are getting their information. Republicans and Trump supporters are getting it in these new mediums. And so I ask you, as the head of the party, whether it's your own press job or the advice that you give to candidates, what are you telling them about how to spend their time when it comes to getting their message out?
Find alternative methods, right? I mean, and go talk on the Sean Spicer show. I mean, the key is that you have got to find a way to get your message to your voters. And the by far the most cost-effective way throughout the course of this election was not to go on mainstream TV. If you look at the media spending from Kamala Harris's campaign versus President Trump's campaign, it was overwhelmingly tilted towards Kamala Harris on that mainstream TV. She was throwing money away as far as we are concerned. We knew who the voters were that we needed to reach. We knew what they were watching. We knew how they were getting their news, and we were able to target them on social media platforms, alternative media platforms, direct mail platforms, and we were able to get it to them a lot cheaper. The fact is the Democrats raised and spent $2.5 billion and failed to get that message out for a couple of reasons. One, they didn't have a great messenger. Two, they didn't have a great message. And three, they were running through traditional media that people were just not watching. So we are very happy with the way that we were able to package our message and get it out to people through the alternative media. And then secondly, we just had an exponentially better, candidate with a better message.
Yeah. And by the way, as Democrats do, they went into debt even with all that money. Chairman, I want to ask you, what do you think the role of the RNC and your role is in a second Trump White House? What are you guys going to be doing on a day-to-day basis to support President Trump as we get ready for the midterms?
Sure. Three things that we're going to be focused on out of the gate. Number one is supporting President Trump's nominees. We need to make sure that he is able to staff his administration with the people that are going to be able to get his agenda done. This is an American agenda. And so it really, truly, when we talk about restoring the southern border, rebuilding our economy, keeping our communities safe, making sure that America is strong enough to protect our interests and allies abroad, it's going to take people. And the people that he has nominated for the cabinet officials, as well as the White House staff, are the ones that are going to carry out that vision. We want to make sure that we're supporting that. Secondly, the agenda as it moves forward, we want to make sure that we're going to support. But we also need to be focused on 2026. The fact is that if we lose the House and or the Senate in the midterms, we're going to lose a very critical partner in getting this agenda done. In order to get tax cuts done, we need the House and we need the Senate. In order to get a lot of different legislative priorities done, we're going to need the House and we're going to need the Senate. If we lose either one, then we're looking at fake investigations. We're looking at more impeachments. We're looking at opportunities for them to drag the agenda through the mud for those last 2 years. Very, very critical for us to set up an apparatus right now and start building to get out the vote and protect the ballot, just like we did in the 24 cycle.
You cannot overstate how important that is. I mean, I was there. Second you lose one of those houses, it's impeachment city, baby. And I think people need to understand how critical it is for him to get his policies through and to stop the sham investigations. Let me ask you this. As we get past, obviously you're focused on the midterms. We clear through the midterms. Does J.D. Vance start 2028 off as the front runner?
Well, I think that if you talk to a lot of the voters, that's going to be the case. But we have an amazing bench on the Republican side of the aisle. When you think about all of the Republican governors that we have around the country, you think about all of the folks that are going to be serving in the president's cabinet over the course of the next couple of years. You think about even members of Congress or others that have been out there in our ecosystem. We have an amazing group of talented individuals that could be in a position to step up and run for president. The Democratic Party right now is in absolute free fall. I really don't see anybody there who wants to step up and acknowledge the deficiencies that they had in this election cycle. It wasn't just bad messengers. They had a bad message. And on our side of the aisle, we have an America First agenda that Donald Trump has put on the table that the American people have overwhelmingly voted for. And so we have a number of candidates who are going to be able to pick up the mantle from President Trump and be able to run on an American First agenda and be able to really, truly have an opportunity to serve America.
So does that mean that the RNC currently under the rules that you guys have will maintain neutrality?
Yeah, we absolutely will. Look, and we have in the past, and we will continue to do that on our side. The beautiful thing is we really, truly do have a very, very deep bench of talented individuals that I look forward to seeing in this primary cycle.
When it comes to his nominees, you mentioned the support for them. What's your advice to senators? I've given this statistic out. Not a single Senate Democrat voted against a single Biden nominee. For those Republican senators right now that might be wavering on a Trump nominee, what's the message from you as the chairman of the party?
Well, I really think there's two things to it. First off, you've got to meet with them and you've got to have a conversation with them because the president has been extremely careful in picking talented individuals that are going to be able to implement the agenda that he ran on. And then secondly, everybody needs to understand this is an American agenda. The President Trump ran on, restoring the southern border, rebuilding our economy, keeping our communities safe. This is what the American people want. And if these candidates are the ones to implement that, then any senator is going to have to be very careful if they're voting against that agenda that just overwhelmingly won this election.
Chairman, the last thing I'm going to ask you, can you commit to me today that you will put every resource of the Republican National Committee behind Donald Trump's effort to end daylight savings and free us all once and for all?
You know, I think the president made it clear in his tweet that that is the plan. I think, obviously you're going to have to take that up with the farmers all across the country who may have a different opinion. But look, I think what I will say is this. The full resources of the RNC are going to be invested in advancing this America First agenda and making sure that we are going to make America great again. And then we're going to go ahead and win in the 26 election cycle and make sure that we get a full 4-year term with President Trump to get that done.
All right. Well, you guys did a great job this cycle. Thank you for your leadership, that of Laura Trump as well, and continued success going forward.
You know, Sean, if I can take just 30 more seconds, I want to just give a shout out to Laura Trump for her great leadership, her great work here at the RNC. We have never had a co-chair who has done as much as she did during this particular election cycle, and it has been an absolute pleasure to work with her. I am thankful that she was willing to step up and serve as co-chair, and really, truly, the entire party owes her a debt of gratitude and thanks.
Amen. Merry Christmas, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being with us.
You too. Take care, Sean.
You bet. What a great conversation with Michael Whatley. We've got a big week ahead with you. Victor Davis Hanson is here. Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project. He's going to be joining us as well. And we're going all the way up through Christmas and New Year's, folks. Guests lining up, talking to us about the New Year's. You're never going to want to miss one. Go to my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. Please sign up. I give you all sorts of information about the inauguration, behind the scenes tips, my little insight twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. It's free to sign up. I'd love you to sign up as a VIP, though, or give that as a gift. Please go to SeanSpicer.com. All right. Great to see you. We'll be looking forward to seeing you back here on Wednesday. Have a great night.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.